illustrations. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. They're right in the textbook. But what I want to talk about is long bone structure. Okay? There are different kinds of bones in a human. If we look at the skeleton, we have things like flat bones, like the pelvis is a flat bone. The scapula is a flat bone. Okay, there are the bones of the skull are flat bones. There are irregular bones, like vertebrae. Okay, but for structure today and growth, we're going to talk about long bones. Okay, bones have, and there's a couple terms that come up with bones. The ends of the bone are called the epiphyses, just so you know, and the middle of the bone is called the diaphyses. And the ends of the bone are made of what is called spongy bone. We saw that with that little video about Gustav Eiffel. The middle of the bone is called the diaphyses, and it's compact bone. Did everybody get that? Remember that spongy bone is bone with all kinds of like spaces in it. Why would bone have spaces in it? What does it do? Why would this be all thick and hard all the way through? Be heavier. Did you say that, Mike? Correct. So it lightens the bone. What else? Zach, what did you say? Okay, blood is produced in the middle, in the marrow, right down the middle of the bone. The round of the marrow is compact bone, very hard, very thick. Okay, but up here in the ends is this spongy bone. Why would that? And it's not really spongy; it just looks spongy. Okay, it's like regular bone, but if you look at some of these bones that are broken at the ends, the real ones, you can see the struts. Why? To make it lighter and still. Come on, what did Gustav Eiffel learn? Not flexible. Bone isn't flexible. That's right. It's physics, right? Deflect the vectors of force. So as you put force on the end of the bone, those forces are deflected down into the thickest parts of the bone. Okay, that's a really important idea. So you lighten the bone, but still have that strength. You aren't going to have to know all these other words in here. Okay, just know that the ends of the bone are spongy bone and the middle of the bone is compact. There are lots of canals through bone. I'm going to show you this in the next slide. You don't have to know the names of them, but you might read them. Haversian canals and Volkmann's canals. Why would bone have canals in it? Let me click to the next slide. Oh, forget it. For blood vessels and nerves. When you look at a skull, and you look at the real skull back there, and you look at a skull that's just a fake one like this, you'll notice that, for example, in the chin, there are two little holes. Okay? Right here in your cheekbones, there are two little holes. Okay? If you look underneath the skull, there's all these holes. Why are all those holes in the skull? Why do you have these holes right here in your face? Well, you can feel this. How do you feel it? Something must be bringing a message back to your brain. Right? So you touch yourself on the cheek right here. I feel that because a nerve has to get into there and go to my brain. Does that make any sense? Plus, I have to. My cheeks get all red in the winter. Where does the blood? How does blood vessels get out there? You probably never thought of that. They have to get. They don't travel up and over the surface. You wouldn't have any flexibility. If you cut yourself right here, you bleed to death. The main blood vessels go up into your head and then come out. Right? They branch off and come out through these little openings. Does that make any sense? So your skull is full of openings that you can see. Okay? There are also openings in the skull you can't see. Openings like right here and right up here that make your skull lighter, but they also can fill with fluid. You know what those are called? Sinuses. How many of you had a sinus infection in your life? That means that sometimes right here and right right here, you get a really bad cold, your head feels like it's just throbbing, it hurts right above your eyes, and right here, that's because your sinuses have filled up. Sinuses are spaces in your skull. And you know what it does besides make your head hurt? It makes your voice sound different. Because part of the sound of your voice has to do with the sinuses in your skull as the sound reverberates around. So I have this beautiful voice, because it reverberates in my, I don't know if I do or not, I sound really funny to myself when I hear myself talk. Did you ever notice that? Like when you hear yourself talk, you sound different. When I hear myself on these videos, I'm like, holy crap, I sound different, right? Or you hear your voice on a voicemail, you're like, that's me, that's you. That's what you sound like to everybody else, FYI. Yes, Alex, you have a very high-pitched voice. Just kidding. But really, it's because what you hear is coming through your skull. Right? When I hear my voice, I'm getting my voice out here, and I'm getting my voice through my skull. Does that make sense? My eardrum in here is hearing it differently than you're hearing it, which is fun. Okay, anyway. So, let me click to the next slide a second. Okay, so this just shows the little canals through the bone. Okay, again, this is out of your textbook, so it should be, you can see things like this in there. All right, this is the inside of the bone. This is compact bone with all these little canals for blood vessels and nerves. That's why it hurts when you break a bone. That's why also it bleeds when you break a bone inside. Swells, internal bleeding around the bone. So let's talk about growing. Many of you are done growing, some of you are still growing. I would guess most of you are probably done growing. You grew your I thought I was done growing after high school, then I grew another inch. And lost 45 pounds all in the same year. I went back to college and I looked a lot different. Because I was an inch taller and 45 pounds later, that's a lot. And, but I kept growing after high school, and so it'll happen to some of you, probably males and not females. Females grow earlier. Okay, this is the skull. We'll come back to that. There are two kinds of bone growth, essentially. The first kind is in your long bones. When you start out inside of your body, you are hyaline cartilage. Same stuff that's in your nose. Write all this and then I'll explain. Let me start with the bones of the skull. Okay, maybe you wondered why the skull has all these little sutures in it. Maybe you've held a baby and felt a little soft spot on the top of his skull. The feet, as soon as it's born, they say, be careful with the baby's head. First of all, because the baby's head is so much bigger, it's 1/3 the size of his body when it's born, and now when you, it's like way less than that. Okay, if you think about that, you'd have a 2-foot head. If your head was the same size now, proportionally, okay, I know you're picturing somebody that might right now, and that's not very nice. Okay? So, when a fetus is growing, your skull starts out and it's really, really tiny. We're talking about, like the size of probably the size of that to start with, that little red dot. But then as it develops, what happens is bone gets deposited in 5 areas. There, and on the back, where I can't show it. So these are membranes. They're like this, it's like in a plastic saran wrappy covering, your brain is. And then as you grow, bone starts being laid down and it spirals outward like this as it grows. And eventually, that spiraling outward is going to meet. And where it meets, it doesn't meet evenly, of course. You get those little squiggly lines. And so everybody's little squiggly lines are different. Right? You can tell the difference between if you had Sam's skull and Scott's skull, besides the fact that their eyes would probably be closed, but they have little different squiggly lines, because I only ever see you guys like that. Okay? They have little squiggly lines, and they'll be different. But when you're born, they're not all the way formed yet. There's this little space. Those bones haven't formed together yet. There's a couple really good reasons for that. What's the number one most important reason for that? Who do you know? Brain development, not quite. I'm going to draw a circle. That's about 10 centimeters across. That's right. When your baby is born, if you look at it closely enough, it's a little bit of a cone head. Because it has to fit through that 10 centimeter opening. It's good to be a guy, Will. Okay, it's got to fit through a 10 centimeter in diameter opening. What's that? 10 centimeters. A little bit bigger than my fist. And the head is quite a bit bigger than the fist, so it's got to squeeze on through there, right? Not mine either. So, that opening is where it's got, it's a little bit smaller than that. I guess that's not really 10 here. Let me draw it. There we go. Here. There we go. That looks a lot better. Okay? So the baby's skull's got to fit through it. It's got to be flexible to do that. And then in the first few months after birth, these bones keep growing and suture themselves up. Okay? That could be up to 5 years. Up to 5 years where there's a little bit of a soft spot. Are there any questions about that idea? Okay, let's talk about the rest of the bones growing. Okay, hands and feet are not fully formed. If you saw an x-ray of an infant's hands, there's bone and cartilage, there's like dark spaces in it where it's cartilage in. This is in your book. And I think it's important to understand how bones grow. Maybe somebody in here has broken their bone at the growth plate. Anybody? Lena has, and Tiffany has. How many of you have heard of the growth plate? You go to the doctor, and you get an x-ray, and the doctor says, Scott, you got some growing in you yet. Right? And they're like, how the heck do they know that? Well, bone starts out as cartilage. Okay, so we're talking about it in a fetus. Bone gets deposited, starts in the middle, and grows outward for a while. But then, you also get another spot where this is in an embryo, in a fetus after the first trimester, where it puts bone down at the ends and in the middle. Now this is important because remember, the pelvis, the ball of the hip has to grow at the same rate as the rest of the bone. Okay? So what happens is, as bone becomes bone in the middle, and bone becomes bone on the outside, around it, this is the end of the joint, is cartilage. Here's cartilage, but right here is cartilage too. And so as you grow, new bone forms on the sides of the cartilage like this. So bone will be forming here, and bone will be forming here. And the net overall thing is to lay the bone down as the bone keeps growing, and the cartilage moves away with it. So as you lay bone down here, as you're packing it down, the bone is growing in that direction. In all of your bones at the same time. Questions about that? Then you hit the end of your growth, whenever it is, and we have no idea what causes to stop or anything. Okay? Why is it some people are 5 or 6 inches taller than their parents? Some people are shorter than their parents. We really don't have an answer for that. It's something to do with genetics. But all of a sudden it stops. What means it stops is this cartilage here, which was the epiphyseal plate or the growth plate, becomes bone. And it stops. The other thing that happens as you grow, and this can happen, let's say you're lifting weights, and your muscles are getting bigger, and they're putting more stress on your bones, well then your bones will also put more bone down to make them wider. Make them wider. There is such a thing as big bone people. There are people with bones that are heavier than other people's, because their bones are thicker. It could be because that's a genetic thing, along with being you can lift weights and make your bones bigger. You can exercise and make your bones bigger. Okay? Many of you, the bones in your thumbs are pretty strong now because of playing all your video games and texting. Okay, that's probably it.